For more on today's economic numbers, let's turn to Joseph Brusuelas, one of our Bloomberg bests. Bloomberg best means we bring you only the best people on the economy, economists who are the most accurate forecasters in the world. Joe is president of Brusuelas Analytics, and he makes that list, and we're glad to have him on here. Joe, let's talk first of all about bearishness versus bullishness in this data, because it looked all good when it came out, and now every single commentary on the housing market has been, are we headed for a double dip? Why?
Well, I think what you saw today was a little bit of improvement in the index, largely due to seasonal factors. When we get into the spring, those seasonal factors will turn the other way and send the index back down. Second, I think from a fundamental point of view, simply we had enough subsidies put into the system by the federal government that it helped temporarily stabilize the housing market. If you look at other indices and other indicators across the board, they're all pointing towards another leg down in the housing market. And I think more importantly, it's always about supply and demand. There simply isn't going to be enough demand going forward to absorb possibly 4 to 4.5 million homes which are going to enter the market largely due to foreclosures, plus the extra supply in the market that we call the shadow inventory, which we can't track.
Let me get to, first of all, the double dip scenario. Adam Johnson pointed out earlier that you've got to come up before you can have another double dip, and it's barely a blip if you look at the chart. Could it just be that we're bouncing around the bottom here, and then the concern, does the bottom fall out when the tax credit goes away, when the Fed stops backing up the mortgage market?
Well, that's clearly the concern. I don't think that we're going to have a classic double dips. Double dips rarely happen. The only time we had a real double dip was in the early 1980s. I think what we have is just another leg down in the market. The housing market acts as a net drag on overall economic growth. And I think we really only see in the second half of the year 2 to 2.5% overall growth, which simply is not sufficient to meet the sort of growing demand we have for people who want to get back and work.
Also, I wonder about the foreclosures. I mean, Michael Thader from Logic was on the other day, and he was saying, look at who holds these mortgages, right? The Fed, the Treasury, Fannie and Freddie hold these mortgages. They don't want to foreclose on these homes. They're not in the business of holding and then selling homes. Do you think that we somehow avoid this massive inventory that's coming on the market, or is it unavoidable?
Well, it's not an accident that the Obama administration's reached out and looked to revamp their own loan modification program. Look, it hasn't been very successful. We're not sure how the new program, or the new and improved program, is really going to improve things, but they're certainly going to try. I'm very skeptical about whether it's going to actually help. To be honest with you, we're going to need to have the banks and the federal government, who owns a lot of these loans, simply begin to engage in substantial principal reductions of 30% or perhaps more.
What does it mean, by the way, that we see so much of the activity in the lower income bracket? The less expensive homes are the ones that are being trafficked the most here.
Well, if you look at, for example, the last existing home sales, 27% of all sales were cash transactions. I think you see a lot of speculative activity, which, by the way, isn't necessarily a good thing, but we have a lot of speculative activity right now for people who
At least it's back, though.
It's back, but in the housing market itself, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. You saw home prices in Los Angeles increased by 1.8% month over month last month. That's not sustainable, and two, I don't think that's giving us a true indication of the condition of the housing market in Los Angeles or California itself.
What about jobs? I mean, you're looking for 275,000 jobs. Could it be, home prices are getting cheaper, people are less concerned about their jobs, and they're getting cheap financing right now? I mean,
well, without a doubt, there's been a substantial improvement in affordability. I think what we're going to be looking at Friday is three things. First is we're going to see a substantial pickup in public sector hiring. What we in the market have been focusing on is the ex-census hiring, what's going on in private hiring. I expect that to inch up towards 100,000, possibly higher, and we're going to get a nice positive payback in the payrolls due to weather-induced effects. So I think we're going to get a very, very substantial increase, but the key is how far do we move above the trend in private sector hiring, and is that sustainable going forward?
Just 10 seconds left. You were chief economist for the Stanford men's basketball team, right? So who's your pick for the Final Four?
Well, I think that I really want Butler to pull this out. And if I was a betting man, I'd go long on Butler. But some nagging thing in the back of my mind says Duke is probably going to be winning this tournament.
All right, Joe, always a pleasure. Joe Brusuelas, Brusuelas Analytics. Quick